This essay example, as well as thousands of others, is available in text format on our website for free and without registration. Simply Google Ivy Panda Free Essays.
Introduction. Globalization is an ideology that promises the empowerment of people across the world since humanity has been facing common problems in the economic, political, and social spheres. The basic ideology of globalization is to enhance global markets through the liberalization of trade and integration of free markets so that services, goods, and capital can move freely across borders. Due to the problem of economic inequality in developing and developed countries, liberalization of trade and integration of free markets offer improved economic solutions. It means that globalization enhances the devolution of economic resources since free markets attract and allow the free movement of services, goods, and capital. Given that economic ideologies of communism restricted and controlled trade, globalization is in tandem with the current economic ideology of capitalism, which allows liberalization and integration of the world's markets, thus a gateway to economic freedom. According to Saul, the globalization ideology promises that economic freedom, not political imperialism, is a determinant of human events and destiny. In this view, globalization forces emanate from economic factors that undergo self-regulation without any human interference. Thus, no one can claim to be in charge of globalization. However, despite the imposing ideology of globalization to free humanity from economic and political imperialism, it has changed its course from market globalism to imperial globalism. Globalization has changed. The basic ideology of globalization is the liberalization of trade and the integration of free markets to enhance social, economic, and political stability across the world. As aforementioned, globalization aims at creating lucrative and free markets that allow the free movement of services, goods, and capital across all international borders, thus, equal distribution of economic resources. Globalization provides a stable economic environment that favors the growth of trade and commerce in capitalist economies that have pervaded almost every country across the world. Therefore, to attain globalization objectives of liberalized trade and markets, countries have to let market forces of capitalism to self-regulate. Unfortunately, given that the United States is a superpower and wants to maintain superiority and shape the destiny of the world, it has usurped globalization as a means of achieving political and economic dominance. Steger argues that, after September 11, 2001 attacks, the ideology of globalization shifted from market globalism to imperial globalism, for the United States merged the world's markets and security to become one thing. The United States holds that liberalized trade and free markets are indispensable to national security, for they play a pivotal role in combating terrorism. Given that Middle East countries had resisted globalization and purportedly hosted terrorism networks, the United States decided to use aggressive forces to open up the Arab world and create free markets as means of combating terrorism, thus changing the essence of globalization into imperial globalism. Liberalized trade and free markets are basic principles of attaining globalization. Nevertheless, the way of achieving them has perplexed many since globalization is a natural process that depends on market factors. Proponents of globalization envisage that global markets are self-regulating mechanisms of trade that are free from any human intervention and thus provide a stable market environment that favors none. Proponents of globalization further describe globalization as leaderless, meaning that no individual, institution, or nation has the capacity to influence it except market and technology trade factors. However, in the wake of the 21st century, the globalization ideology of leaderless shifted to leadership-driven globalization. According to Steger, George Bush, during his presidency, held that humanity has the ability to achieve economic and political freedom through liberalization and that the United States had a moral responsibility and capacity to show leadership. The assertion is contrary to the globalization ideology of leaderless, implying that the United States has shifted globalization from a market perspective to an imperial perspective. In the current world of capitalism, where unequal distribution of resources and restricted markets hinder economic growth and development, globalization seeks to create free markets to allow the free movement of resources. Hence, the creation of free markets and opening up of international borders due to globalization will benefit every individual and country across the world. The supposed benefits of globalization include the creation of larger markets, increasing investment and trade, distribution of resources, the proliferation of jobs, technological innovation, and rapid flow of information. The above benefits are a mirage to developing countries since such countries do not have the capacity to compete effectively in the global market that is constantly facing economic crises. Moreover, since resources follow market demands, free trade and markets have led to unequal distribution of resources that favor the developed countries while exposing the developing countries to the vagaries of economic crises. According to Saul, free trade and markets cushion developed countries from economic crises and make developing countries become particularly susceptible. Realizing that globalization has more economic and political benefits, developed countries like the United States embarked on imperial globalism as means of enhancing globalization and benefiting the society economically. Although globalization started as an economic ideology of empowering people across the world, it has now changed and become a powerful political ideology that also connotes democracy. Economic experts have argued that economic development in a country correlates with the political stability of a nation, in which democracy offers the best form of a political environment. Earlier, globalization envisaged the economic-driven destiny of the world, but due to the changed vision of globalization, it has led to a politically driven destiny, hence the emergence of imperial globalism. Steger asserts that political freedom and democracy are integral components of market liberalization, which has made the United States use imperial powers to gain political dominance in the world. Thus, globalization has become the political ideology of expanding democracy and liberalizing markets through imperial means. Since globalization has proved to have significant benefits to economic growth and development, more so in developed countries, it has become a mandatory ideology that every country must follow or risk facing economic restrictions. Powerful countries like the United States and the United Kingdom are ready to impose any economic restrictions on countries that seem not to be in tandem with globalization trends. Anti-globalization forces such as terrorism and isolated countries are facing threats that compel them to comply, thus imperial globalism. Saul argues that globalization is gradually becoming an imperial force of the United States since the former Secretary of State, Colin Powell, affirmed that the United States is going to fight terrorism alone if other nations are not willing to support it. Therefore, the United States has imperial powers to impose globalization by breaking up closed markets, creating free markets, and expanding its economy. Conclusion. Although globalization started as an economic ideology of empowering people and nations to work cooperatively, it has metamorphosed into a political ideology that seeks power and influence. The essence of globalization was to empower developing countries to gain access to closed markets, enhance equal distribution of resources, create free markets, and allow the proliferation of employment opportunities. However, powerful countries like the United States and the United Kingdom have changed the objective of globalization and made it become a powerful political tool that wields imperial powers against perceived political and economic enemies. Hence, contemporary, powerful countries have the privilege of invading, attacking, or imposing restrictions on other countries so that they can permeate into every aspect of humanity using imperial globalism. Did you like this concept of the globalization ideology sample? To get more works like this one, make sure to check out the free database of academic paper examples at ivpanda.com. You will find thousands of samples for all your study needs, without even having to register.